This is Let's Talk Radio, and we're getting to the root causes, believe that?
Yes.
Of the important issues of the day. We are an on-air community, and we believe that your voice matters, meaning join the conversation. That's what you're here for. And we welcome all thoughts and views without judgment, and I have to tell you that's going to be very hard for me to do.
But that is the literal meaning of radical. Radical radio is
the
root.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the little joke from old
Radis.
Radish.
And yes, so your hosts today are...
Oh, my name is Charles Schultz.
Stephen Hurwitz.
And I'm Paul Raphael. And poor Robin has broken 2 toes in her foot, for heaven's sake. I mean... Come on now. So she is lying with her leg up in the air, and we wish her well and hope she's going to call in today. Won't you all call in today? 415-663-8492. And I do happen to have the tweet box with me as well, so you can even tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. And today's subject is
Constitutional Convention.
The Constitutional Convention. There's another push on this time, or still financed by the Koch brothers, among others, pushing for a Constitutional Convention so to create new amendments to the Constitution.
Sends shivers up and down my spine.
Well, okay, so tell me why.
Why? I'm not so worried about appalled by what they want to add to the Constitution. What I'm frightened about is the fact that they're opening up every amendment to scrutiny and change. And really, the Bill of Rights is what makes us different from a fascist government. You eliminate these things, and witnesses against you don't have to testify against yourself. You're entitled to due process. They can't search or seize your property without a warrant. I mean,
well, those are our ideals.
People don't come in the night.
That's still true.
Well, those are our ideals, but
Yeah,
think since 2001, since the Patriot Act, slowly habeas corpus has been eroded. But it's good that the thing is the ideals have a residual value because it says, when we do find out about them being not respected or transgressed, that's a basis for people to get angry and get interested in something. But
and I see these videos on Facebook where the ICE guys are bashing down the door to get somebody. I wonder, do they have a warrant to do that?
Well, they have to have a warrant.
Was it a terrorist? Well, here again, secret courts, these FISA courts, right? Where if they want to tap your calls, or these kind, any of the secret activity, or the CIA, we know that the Russians did blah blah. How do you know? Well, we can't tell you. I mean, so. The real problem I think we have here is a concentration of power, which leads to an inevitable lack of transparency. How do we know what goes on in those buildings over there in Northern Virginia or in the District of Columbia? How many times have you met your member of Congress? Are you close? Do you talk to them? So all these people are acting. And I don't think they have a strong. We have almost no connection to them. And if you're not able to observe, if you're not able to get access and know what's going on, the temptation for the people who are allowed to operate in secrecy to do things that are illegal or immoral, et cetera, is tremendous because they don't feel accountable to anybody. But
and the people of the Americas do not feel that they're being that they have a voice anymore.
And they don't. They're right.
And so how do we go about getting new amendments in the Constitution? Well, here's Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. So, or by conventions 3/4 thereof. So what they're pushing for now, they've never actually, they have had constitutional conventions, but they've never actually come up with anything worthy of being called an amendment, and certainly never ratified. So the only constitutional convention was the first one, where the founding fathers actually went in and tore up the Articles of Federation, isn't that what it was called?
Or a confederation.
Yeah, Articles of Confederation, and wrote the Constitution. So
or it was a confederation.
They basically changed the governance of the U.S. at the first Constitutional Convention. But in Article 5, right there, it's if 34 state legislatures, not their congressmen, representatives, 34 legislatures of the states get together and say, we want to hold a convention because we want to amend the Constitution. It can be done. It has to be done, and under the Constitution. And if 3/4 of states' legislatures go along with whatever amendment is proposed, it is law. It is part of the Constitution. So this is what they're pushing for right now, because it's a way around Congress. It's a way of whipping up local, more localized support in the states.
Well, this establishment of religion, I think there are a lot of people going to go after that.
Oh. And by the way, 415-663-8492. Please call us. Stephen, you said the disestablishment?
Well, there's a strong constituency. Some even, I think it's our Attorney General thinks that the Constitution does not mean that you can't have religions in the schools, and
doesn't say much about education.
Religion.
The thing is, the Constitution says very little about education. Does not provide a role for the federal government in education. So it's this question of reserved powers, right? The things that the Constitution does not take for the federal government are reserved to the states themselves. So that's. Maybe that means you could have religion in schools or something.
I think it's an end run right now because Betsy DeVos, who wants to actually undermine public school by creating charter schools who will receive federal funds. So if you have a religious school, we'll be paying that school as if they were a public school, and then it'll be a religious school. So they're just it's a way to finance what they haven't been able to do before.
Well, that gets into another question about why religions are tax exempt, which I don't believe that they should be. And it also means that you get religions that have at times been sources of resistance to state power and war and things like that. Well, how much are they going to oppose the activities of a government that doesn't charge them any tax? But another part of that is, say, the San Francisco version, which is, I don't know where this phenomenon started. I'm guessing probably Feinstein as mayor, but it could have been as late as Brown. The city pays out, last time I checked, was about $600 million a year to nonprofits in San Francisco. So why is San Francisco apparently the hub of all of this progressive politics, and yet it really can't get its act together on serious issues? It's because they put all of the activists, all the progressives, on the payroll. Kind of a separate issue, I guess. But please call 415-663-8492 to talk about constitutional conventions.
What would be your fears of a constitutional convention, or what would you like to see proposed as an amendment to the Constitution? Or which amendments would you like to see taken down, or what laws would you like to be struck down?
Certainly the 16th.
The 16th, which is?
Which is to give them power to lay and collect taxes on incomes.
Oh, I see.
Right.
I see.
Federal income tax. Yes. Right.
There's a state for you. It's called Nevada, Stephen. I'll stay at your ranch while you're over there.
I think that's going to be a big one, though. I think they're going to. I think this is a subterfuge. They say something like, "Oh, we want to balance the budget and we want to, have term limits." I think they want to go for taxation. I think that's going to be a big one. They want to go for religion. I think that's going to be a big one, and that I'm afraid of all these. Okay, I agree with you. It says it's a nice piece of paper, but in reality, it's not being. A lot of times we don't pay attention to it.
But here's another point. They're people. Oh, look at that. I think she was flirting. Oh, she's come to say hello, my darling.
Good morning. Nobody on the air knows
sorry.
what that was all
That
about.
was-
I'm so sorry.
I'm not going to get
So
excited.
sorry to our
here.
listeners.
That's right. Amanda was flirting with me again. The constitutions of the Soviet bloc, right, of the Eastern European countries, Soviet Union itself, those are some of the most beautiful documents you'll ever read. The rights and freedoms and blah, 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 the vision that they had. Of it. So the reality of the kind of freedoms you have and what's on paper, often a hugely different thing. And in a way, it seems like a Pandora's box to me. You had a constitutional convention. Well, how many people would that be? And who would go? And then, how quickly would it be before?
Well, it would be separate conventions in each state, or the legislatures of each state would get together at some central point and discuss what they want to do. Most of what they want to do, of course, is take federal power away, because they think the federal government is overweening in its power and is forcing states to do things they don't want to do in exchange for federal funding, and they hold them to ransom for that, which is what's currently happening with us, of course, with California, of course. But it was a Slate article that came into my view about Lawrence Lessig, who,
Harvard professor,
Harvard
sure.
professor.
And he's sort of free exchange of information. He's a big internet kind of philosopher.
He ran for the Democratic. He was a presidential candidate in the last run-up for the election. Of course, didn't get anything. He's trying to create a third party, actually. And it was his idea was to have a constitutional convention to get rid of Citizens United, the lack of control of money in politics. On the other hand, there's ALEC, A-L-E-C, Americans for something legislative exchange council
commission or council,
or whatever, which is a right-wing, funded by the Koch brothers.
They write laws and they take them to state legislatures and try and get them passed in the state level, and they're funded by, these big corporate...
Funded by the Canadian oil sands, by the way.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah. Right.
The funny thing is that Democrats...
And the Tea Party, of course, which is funded by, anyone bigger than the dress shop on High Street.
Well, I mean, Leo Panett said on this show once before, the Republican Party isn't even a party. And actually, neither is the Democratic Party. I mean, these are holograms created by the forces they feel they need to be responsible to. In this case, it's with the sources of their funding. In both cases, overwhelmingly, the phrase Wall Street would sum it up. But the Republicans have been much more active in terms of taking control of state legislatures and using things like ALEC to come up with legislation and then move that legislation through those legislatures and get the law changed. You haven't had a similar kind of thing with the Democratic Party because I don't think they care. I mean, the clientele are these coastal elites. They care a lot about the White House. It seems, and those kinds of things. But in terms of the nitty gritty of local politics and getting power in that way, they don't seem to have been keeping pace with how organized the Republicans have in that effort. So 663-8492. Please call us. Yes.
Tell us what your fears, what your hopes would be for a constitutional convention if it ever occurred.
Isn't this like a perfect storm for the Republicans? They control so many governorships and so many state legislatures, and now the White House,
Senate, White House, and
the entire government, essentially.
And the Supreme Court, basically.
But they don't seem to have any kind of coherence about what they're doing. I mean, the thing is, Republican policy has been so antithetical to having any kind of constituency that could win you an election in the United States for so long that, and as the identity politics stuff times out for the Republicans, which is, Jesus, 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 we hate abortion, we hate gays, we hate all that stuff, as that doesn't seem to obtain as it used to, I think you're seeing the whatever the Republican Party was collapse even further. And interestingly, the only thing keeping the Democratic Party together is this collapse of the Republican Party.
Is the opposition to the Republican Party, well, of course. I mean, the opposition keeps them both going, right? Interestingly enough, the Tea Party is all for this constitutional convention because they want to get a balanced budget, which is code for cut all programs, which is basically the Trump budget. And Alec, as we said before. But who's opposing? Who is opposing this? Phyllis Schlafly's
Is still alive? She's still alive.
I don't know. This was written in 2016.
Okay.
Is she still alive?
Call in, Phyllis, if you can hear us.
Eagle Forum is still going.
Eagle Forum?
Eagle Forum.
Well, her and Dr. Goebbels.
They are fighting the Constitutional Convention
You make fun,
push.
but
And the John Birch Society. Still alive? Yes. The John Birch Society is opposing this push for a constitutional convention by right-wingers because they think it would maybe it would open up an entire rewriting if they wanted to do it of the convention, because there are no constitutional rules about how this convention is run. They just say, no, get together, have a convention, and then vote on it.
Phyllis Schlafly is certainly an eccentric figure, let's say, on the right wing of American politics. But something you need to understand about this is take the Cato Institute, for example. Cato, the famous Roman legislator and
I thought he was
orator.
I thought he was Clouseau's butler.
Oh, I forgot that.
Now Cato.
That could be what they named the Cato Institute after. I have to double check my facts on this. Anyway, Cato Institute is quote unquote libertarian. Now, and when it started, a lot of the people that were involved with it were just very sincere libertarians, not the kind of, when we hear that word, the creepy billionaires we associate with. But the Koch brothers, in particular, took over the Cato Institute. Right? They basically own it and run it now, and they forced out all of those people who were saying, and like I said, I mean, there would be very reasoned and persuasive arguments that you would get from those kind of real, genuine old libertarians for why why they believe in what they believe and why they're trying to pursue the goals that they are. But those things have been hijacked by these other, like the Tea Party, for example. There are a lot of poor rural whites in the United States that have real grievances. But this is an organization, even just a concept of an organization, which is managed and directed by these extremely wealthy people that want less government because their power is enhanced.
Was it also insurance company? Health insurance companies were behind it because it was all about fighting Obamacare, wasn't it? Wasn't that when the Tea Party got going?
Oh, I love that. I didn't know
Or
that.
am I wrong about that?
I didn't know that.
Call in.
Why not?
241-566-38492. Tell me I'm wrong.
That's right. People, Steven Siegel over there at the health clinic, call in. I see you wandering around town aimlessly. I know you have nothing to do.
So what about the Supreme Court? What these guys want to do with the Supreme Court and the supermajority that they're going to?
What would this be?
If a law is passed democratically, okay, not just deciding between two parties, etc., conflict. If the law has been passed democratically, then, which I don't know what that means, then you need a supermajority in order to overturn that. So
a supermajority
7 out of 9
in the court.
In the Supreme Court.
So if a law is deemed unconstitutional, it's taken to the courts. If it gets to the Supreme Court, you need a supermajority to overturn the legislation that's been passed.
That's right.
I don't really see the Republicans, quote-unquote, or the Democrats, people with any vision whatsoever. And I think that they're in a kind of – and this is a trend you could take back to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. All the stories that we told about ourselves about what it meant to be an American or who we were, what this party represented and what that party represented, those stories have all broken down. So when you begin to think about, well, Constitutional Convention, yes or no, this is a question I've been thinking about since my teens. Is it, what kind of world do you want to live in? What does it mean? What kind of America do you want to live in? I mean, nobody's asking himself these really basic questions, but they would have the kind of hubris to jump into, well, we want a new constitution, or now the left is saying we want California to secede, and we did a show on that.
Mm-hmm. What about the centrist? Where are the centrists? Is there a middle Republican Party? Are there some? Are there moderates?
Well, there used to be more, right? Because you had old style like Western conservatives, which actually Ronnie was great at. What Ronnie did was able to play the public figure that those old style Western conservatives would like, while at the same time being this big government, whatever. I mean, even as evil empire stuff. I mean, he did negotiate at Helsinki, right? This nuclear arms control stuff. So it was just the public presentation, what our relationships to politics is, which is what you see on TV at night or now on the internet, and the actual activities of government are just two very different things. And so now we're left in a world where all the politicians are these kind of performers who are lying or dissembling all the time. And what actually really happens in the legislative process, et cetera, is who knows? Best guess. What's going on? There are Marines in Syria right now. Is anybody talking about that? I mean, no.
What I'm surprised is no one's talking about the fact that 200 civilian deaths occur, from what I've heard recently, from the bombings in Yemen. If 10 civilians died under Obama, they'd be screaming. Now there's
no. That's the thing. I mean, Obama.
200.
Well, the Obama administration. Well, you remember the hospital that we bombed? It killed over 100 people in Afghanistan. I mean, that went under the rug pretty quickly. But then the Russians bomb a hospital, and it's on the news all day, every day. But again, in a way, there's this desire by people. It's a nostalgic desire. It's a sort of psychological. It has to do with the way we think about recreating the Cold War, because that's when the world made sense. There were good guys and bad guys. You remember that Rocky movie with the tall blonde guy that gets beat up? That's great. I'm for tall blonde guys getting beaten up.
American radiation is much better than Soviet radiation.
Well,
and
the world was a simpler place, and it's also a much more patriarchal place. You didn't have to grow up because the state was daddy, and we like that. We'd like to get back to that. I mean, I think there's a tremendous. Why does patriarchy persist? People like it, and that's what they used to. So the confusion of the 1990s and the last decade and a half has been deeply decentering for the whole culture, and we'd like to sort of.
So you sound like you're making the case for a constitutional convention.
I would say rather than trying to do these theoretical things, that people should focus on what are the things that we need to survive, and how could we connect those needs or that relationship to survival with local democratic processes.
Sure.
So and that sounds
localization,
really,
and that in essence, although it's this is what they say, they want state powers, right? I mean, they've been going for this ever since the Civil War broke out. States' rights, and that the federal government has too much power, is not listening to people in the US. Yeah, right. I mean,
that's running an empire.
So this is actually going on. So a resolution is pending in the Nebraska legislature proposing that Nebraska call for a convention to amend the U.S. Constitution. And I think we're up to 20. That would make it 28.
Yeah, and they need 34.
And the Kochs are going after 7 states, Arizona, the usual suspects, Alabama, all the
Here's
usual
another
ones.
one that I'm not sure what it means, but they talk about Congress cannot regulate activity that occurs only in one state. Now, I'm not sure what that means, but...
Well, it's like the Commerce Clause, right, that it's interstate commerce that they deal with. If something's going on just in California, the federal government's ability to regulate that's different if it's going on between California and Nevada.
But that already exists then.
Yeah.
In terms of federal control of interstate commerce, yeah.
I think it's more social, isn't it? I mean...
Well, state legislatures have power. I mean, they have power to create laws, although, now, more than ever, we're seeing the bribery that comes from accepting federal funding. If you're going to go against this president or this administration,
it's even softer.
You run the danger of getting your federal funding.
It's even softer than that. On the level of rhetoric, Jared Huffman would be one of your best sort of left liberally type congressmen. But the reality is there's no big corporate donor I've ever seen him turn down. I mean, he takes their money, so I'm sure they expect something for it. That wasn't a gift. AT&T just really likes Jared, and so they thought, here, have some money.
Is anybody call in, help us here?
Yeah, exactly. 663-8492. I'm going to leave the studio. I'm going to go down to the payphone at Toby's, and I'm going to call in. Is Mia still here? Come on, Mia.
You said something that I don't want to let it go by. Though.
What's that?
You're talking about patriarchy, and everyone felt more comfortable about it.
You said the P word.
There is exactly. But half of the people
Stephen
don't
has an
feel
allergy
comfortable.
to the P word.
More than half people don't feel comfortable with patriarchy. I'm thinking of women, for example.
No, I disagree with that. I think what we would have had, say, in Hillary Clinton would be a female patriarch.
Yes.
That would be my point.
Yeah.
And just all of this thing that, where does all the things that we need to survive come from? They really don't come from what we think about as who we are and what our day-to-day life is, because they just appear on trucks and planes and trains, and they go to little stores and you have little bits of money to trade that you buy these things with. We're so unconnected. And this is particularly problematic for West Marin, which feels itself so embedded in nature. I can't think of a place more disembedded from nature. It has no conception of what it really is in the world. It is this thing that burns fuel all day, every day, just to feel normal, right? That's a given. Okay, so let's talk about global trade and global war and all of this stuff. It's built into our lives and the way we live, but we don't. It's not part of our self-conception. I don't see people regularly reflecting on their commute and saying, "Wow, that's the reason why people have to be blown up in Mosul."
That's a whole subject for another talk.
Whole other
It'd be
show.
very interesting, though, to
Please,
discuss that.
what Stephen is saying is, please call her 663-8492 or 8317. Do call in. I know you have something to say. Lots of people say they listen. They're just lying.
And like the show.
And like the show. They're
If
lying
you
to
like
save my
us,
feelings. Yeah.
call us. Call me, won't you?
Indeed.
415-663-8492 or 8317. If 8492, when 8492 is full, call in on 8317. The legislative resolution in Nebraska, like many of the others, stated goal is to limit the size and scope of the federal government. But this is who is he? He's a law professor at the University of Nebraska College of Law who wrote this. But whatever the sponsor's intent, a new constitutional convention could open the door to changing the whole document.
Exactly. My sentiment.
Conservatives may try to limit federal legislative power, require a balanced budget, and even abolish federal income tax. Liberals may try to overturn Citizens United, replace the Electoral College with a national popular vote for president, and prohibit partisan gerrymandering. All good things, no?
Yeah.
Liberals out there? Why? And would you would you support a constitutional convention that accomplished those goals?
Well, doesn't the president really want to attack a lot of things in the First Amendment? Establishment religion, free exercise thereof, and the freedom of speech, and the press.
Assembly is the one that's really
And assembly.
more
now,
and more constrained.
Now you could be it could be a criminal misdemeanor if you block if they hit you on the road, they're let off
Is that
the hook.
North Dakota? Yeah, right.
Hey, 663-8492 calls. I just say about Lessig and this whole thing with changing the formal rules, as I was saying in the ride down with Paul, the concentration of wealth in so few hands, these massive corporations, and the institutional power of these federal institutions, right? Trying to curb their power, like, say, repealing Citizens United or changing that stream of money, that stream of power. It's like dropping a rock in it, which may temporarily disrupt it, but then the water just moves around the rock. And so if you have
wears it down.
And so if you have a situation, you have a society which concentrates wealth and power in the way that ours does, and there are ways to other ways of organizing a society. It's not doom and gloom. If you have that much concentration of power, it will find a way to subvert these formalistic changes. So term limits, that's supposed to be a good thing, so you won't get politicians who have too much power. Well, now just the lobbyists run Sacramento, and they're the only ones that know anything. And all the politicians are just looking, if they're successful, they're looking up to Congress. If they're not successful, and this happens all the time, they look down to be a supervisor again.
What about limiting the funds that go to defense based on revenue, for example?
Well, yeah, that's and again, that's California's problem as well, right? The defense industry is a huge part of the California economy, and so everybody, again, self-conception. People in West Marin think I'm a Californian. I don't like Northrop Grumman. I mean, I like the dividend checks, of course, but
Lockheed Martin, which sponsors an
I didn't know they paid
NPR,
dividends.
KQED.
whatever they do. I mean, people live off the income from these companies that they abhor, right? It's like, okay.
San Diego would not exist.
San Diego, LA Basin, all the
right.
the defense industry is all over California. It's a big Jerry Brown, he supported the B-1 bomber back in the Senate run in '82, and subsequently he did an interview with
Well-paid jobs.
well-paid. Indeed, they are. He did an interview with Gore Vidal on his radio show, We the People, back in the mid-'90s, and so Gore Vidal said, "So why did you take the money from Lockheed Martin?" And Jerry Brown said, "Well, I thought I needed some defense stuff in my bio, so
Can we get Gore Vidal on this show?
Gore Vidal is dead.
That would be good
That would
if
be
we could
very
do
impressive.
that. And this is KWMR, also supported by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but also supported by Amanda Ross Skincare Salon in Uptown Bolinas. Open Friday through Monday and by appointment, offering custom-designed facials, Swedish and deep tissue massage, reflexology, and waxing services. Amanda Ross Skincare products and more. Appointments available at 415-233-8736 or online at amandarossskincare.com. And KWMR also supported by the Community Land Trust Association of West Marin, hosting a workshop on Sunday, April 2nd from 1:30 to 3:30 at the Dance Palace Community Center in Point Reyes Station, providing information to homeowners about how to create a rental home on their property and ease the affordable housing burden in our community. The workshop will cover incentives as well as design assistance and other support. More information at 415-663-1005. That's CLAM. Excellent. Spirit Matters. KWMR is supported by Spirit Matters in the heart of Inverness Park, offering an assortment of oddities and deities, garden art, gifts and treasures, jewelry, cards, books and statues, supporting international and local small-scale fair trade artisans since 1997. Open Thursdays through Mondays, and more information at 415-663-8699. That's 415-663-8699. It's KWMR, 90.5 Point Reyes Station, 89.9 Bolinas, 92.3 San Geronimo Valley, online at kwmr.org. And we have National Weather Service issuing a wind advisory. The wind is going to get very strong out there, 20 to 30 miles an hour, along with gusts up to 45 miles an hour. Put your baseball caps on backwards, because they will blow off.
Baseball caps.
And call us, won't you? 415-663-8492. It's Charles and Stephen and Paul. And we're discussing the Constitutional Convention.
I think there's a big one that they're going to want to go for, and that is this business of you're a citizen if you're born in the United States. They've talked about that numerous times.
Isn't that the law?
Doing away with naturalization, you mean? Uh-oh. That would be me.
Gracious. Get rid of him.
That would be me. You can't get rid of me, that either.
Fell out.
Hi, we have a caller. You're on the air, caller. What's your name, please? And please, what's your language?
Tom Yarish here.
Tom, how are you?
I'm parked here by the Sonoma County landfill, looking in your direction. I'll be at the Station House Cafe in about 45 minutes. And since I pledged so much money last week, I think you guys should show up at the Station House and show me a little bit of appreciation. How about a reverse grant in the form of free lunch?
Are you buying? Because I don't know about Stephen and Paul, but I don't just pretend to be broke. I'm actually broke. So if you buy me lunch, I'll show up.
And I'm a working man, Tom. I get things.
I didn't know you worked at anything. Tell us about that.
Anyway, Constitutional Convention. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea, but I'm essentially for secession. I think we should just give up on the whole mess. Create a state of nation of California.
Just California?
Shouldn't go any further south than the end of the Bay Area. I don't really want San Jose in it either. So,
how about Modoc County, Stanislaus County, the state of Jefferson,
Trinity, Del Norte?
We could make them a colony.
Well, they have thought about splitting the state of California.
We're narrowing this, into 6 states. Yes,
we could at least get 2 more senators.
Right.
Well, I think what you're saying, Tom, and to some extent it resonates with me, is that if you want to have any kind of coherent politics, you have to have a sort of a topography, a geography that makes sense in terms of the relationship between people and how they survive. So the empire does this, undermines this in 2 ways. One, none of us can function without all this global trade and all these resources that are being taken to our door all the time. And 2, it's controlled from Washington, D.C. So I think the process of rationalizing it is, looking at smaller units of government. But I would say work with the existing ones. This idea that you're going to change the formal relationships, you're going to create a new state or new states, and then we'll figure out what we're going to fix. Terrible idea. Figure out what you're going to fix, and then figure out how you can do that within the power you have as citizens already. That's not something that I think people contemplate very often, and they should.
Yeah.
How would secession from the Union work with, as we were talking about, all the federal involvement, the military in California, etc.?
First of all, I think we should issue our own currency.
The West Marin dollar.
Richard Kirschman, please call in. 663-8317.
California should have its own currency, and it should be denominated in something that you can understand, not false promimes.
Oh, I see.
Gold standard, maybe wants to go back to
gold standard.
Gold, and then their hills. Well, that's interesting. I guess I don't know, and that's I hadn't thought about that.
Wow.
Well,
How would that work, Tom?
but
Well, I don't know. You something about valuing, placing a value on labor and natural resources so that they're appropriately incorporated in the system of valuation and structured around that. So an hour of your time is worth about 10 minutes of my time, and we can go from that.
very good. Very good.
Okay, till your toilet gets stopped. Yeah.
Gracious. Well, yeah, you got me. Again, all of these formal changes, like, is I think slightly naive. I mean, you think about what would you actually change about your life? How is it that we live now, we survive now, that doesn't work? And when we say social contract, well, Thatcher kind of won. There is no society, and that's the way people
Who talks
behave.
about the social contract these days? That's an unknown term. Even if it were talked about, people wouldn't understand where it came from.
Yeah, well, there are lots of
Isn't
different.
that the Constitution itself?
Well, it's a kind of formalization of this idea of social contract, but there are a lot of different versions of it. There's Hobbes's version, there's Locke, there's Rousseau, famously, right? There are all these different versions of social contract. But I think, part of the problem with why we've had one caller on the Constitutional Convention issue is that, again, these concepts are very, very foreign, and people don't think about themselves as having anything to say about it. And I think that they are mystified by the unknown, and I think that, again, in a deeply risk-averse society, there's an essential element of curiosity, which is the willingness to take risks, the willingness to encounter things that you don't understand. And so I think, unless we do puppies, it's difficult to get people to call in. People know
convention.
Puppy convention. Oh, are you kidding? Puppy convention? I mean, this place be filled. Westminster Dog Show here at KWMR. So it's or Crufts for Paul, since he's going to be deported. So we changed the Constitution.
Apparently, I'm going to be deported.
So the social contract is just this idea that individuals give up some of their freedom. This is more Rousseau's vision, in order to have a collective order that creates a security and a mutual benefit and mutual aid between people.
Mm-hmm.
But so his conception would be that man in nature is absolutely free, he can do whatever he wants, but when we decide to be social or have the social contract, we say, I'm not going to steal from Stephen that he knows about.
Basic morals.
Or whatever the decision is.
But I'm going to have to support his children. I pay taxes to keep them in school and out of jail.
Who Stephen's children? Oh,
Does he have children?
yeah, he does have.
do.
He does it too. He didn't support it. He wants payment retroactively for the support of those children.
Exactly.
He'd like a check for the last 30 years.
They're adults.
They're adults. Yeah, so it's the idea that we give something up in order to participate in this group and just in essence. And citizenship, it's like, again, there's all these kind of formal ways of
What can
describing.
I do for my country?
Well, that's a horrible thing. Jack Kennedy was a natural fascist. And thank goodness.
Well, but what can I do for my community?
Or what am I willing to give up?
You're not just, no man is an island. You're not just a single-celled amoeba floating around and unconscious of everything else. We all have social interaction at all times, and if we want to be a part of any community, whatever that might mean, there is a de facto social contract just because you're dealing with other people. Every time you go to a store, you're dealing with someone, and you don't go in and berate them, and you don't steal candy off the counter. And,
you might. But I think the problem with that is that it appears, it still has this appearance of sociability or of community, and the park still appears to be nature or blah blah blah. I think that those things have radically changed, but we don't perceive it. So today. You go to the store, but there's no question of, and there really is no question, of me helping you pay for something, or the community saying we're going to subsidize the cost of these food staples because, some people have less ability to buy them than others. That we do, when I've seen so many people evicted or forced to sell and just marshal. Some of them, because their houses were too expensive or whatever, they couldn't deal with the mortgage. There was no question of the
anyone
people
getting together
and to make that happen. And in some sense, it's because of inflation. In some sense, that the bill is huge, right? And just a few people in Marshall would have trouble doing anything about it. But it just shows you how sentimental our idea of friendship has become. When it came down to it, and friends of mine and neighbors, people I'd liked, were in trouble, there's nothing I could do for them. And there wasn't anything socially that was going to happen to change that either. So you can believe that you live in a community and a society just as long as you never test it. And technologically and economically, we're set up to think of ourselves and be individual units who have to pay for all their own individual expenses.
You're forgetting that the church has always played a part of that. When somebody who was a member of the church got into trouble, they could look to this group.
Sure, guilds.
Yeah, if they behaved properly.
Well, we're assuming that they're part of
Tom,
the
you're still on the phone.
Are you?
Guys, I have to go.
Yeah,
I see.
Lunch.
Well, we'll see you at lunch. Yes, you'll be paying, I guess.
Yes, thank you,
Wonderful.
Tom. You're
Thank you
a
so much in
fantastic
advance.
donation. And whatever the $50 I don't eat, Tommy, just give me in cash. So 663-8492 or 663-8317. 8492-8317.
You're being so abstract, though, about all this. I mean, that's not what's on people's minds when they want to get a convention together.
Right.
They're not saying, well, who are we as a community?
Well, they should be. That's the problem is they don't have any.
Well,
they don't have any thoughts.
They're saying, who are we as a nation or as a state, and what is my say, and what is my place in this? Isn't that the underlying?
I think they want to be less of a community. That's one of the reasons they want this convention. We don't want to spend money on people in need. Why don't they just go get a job?
Yeah, I think there are people with that attitude, but I would say if you can devolve power, if you can make power more diffuse rather than more concentrated, you're not talking about less engagement with politics. You're talking about more engagement with it. The problem is it's so petty and awful. Well, we don't have any time to think about local politics, really. People don't want to engage with it mostly. And the people who do want to engage with it, like powerful real estate developers, don't have very nice intentions. I mean, that's just the last. I'm sorry. You were
No. I was thinking more of what you said about people in the community not want to engage. I think this is a community that has a lot of engagement.
They want to do it in sentimental terms. See, I'll give you an example.
By that?
Sentimental terms would mean that everybody has all of their needs satisfied, and they're completely separate from all those other people into a specific space at a specific time to do some kind of ephemeral cultural activity. But it isn't about, hey, Steve, I need $20, whatever. People would think of that as unfriendly. They would think of that as kind of breaking the rules of friendship, that I would ask you for something and need something from you. That's counter what friendship really is. That's what I mean by sentimentality. It's not that those events aren't interesting, and hopefully Tony's will open again soon, and we can get.
We can all talk about it over delicious seafood.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm going to need help pushing my car out of my garage next week.
Yes. So there we go.
Anyone who'd like to help me with that, I'm getting it towed away on Friday next week. So anyway, show community support.
Who told me they had a truck who could do it? Oh, that was you. Never mind. No, Malcolm. Malcolm could.
So are you saying that people don't want to give when it hurts? I mean, as long as it's easy, people give. But if it really is, I'm giving you something because I won't have it.
I think there is a feeling that there's a zero-sum game out there. Anything that Charles gets is something that Stephen loses, right? But I'll give you another example. There are people I've known for 7 years I've lived out here that I like, that I have friendly relationships with, and actually you'd be sort of in this book, although I have been to your house. I've never had dinner with them at their house.
You've been to my house?
I have been to your house, but you didn't give me any food. Come on. But, and that's a real thing where I understand we come out of a very private culture and we love our private space and time and things like that, but there is a lack of sharing real needs, which means that we both have this fantasy that we live in a society or a community, and the day-to-day reality of it is we're lonely actors trying to get what we need to survive in a competitive environment.
Can we put this in the Constitution that this needs to happen?
I would think, as Steve said, people need to I disagree. I mean, people need to think about, well, what kind of world do they want to live in? What relationships do they have? This would be the first time they ever examined them. Think about how many people are just utterly unconscious of the fact that they're filling up their gas tank every day. And I think that people are subtly aware. I think it's why there isn't an anti-war movement really in the country anymore.
Because there's no draft.
Well, there's no draft, and also the reality is you got to have the fuel. And if you have to have the fuel to survive, how moral can you be? How big a stand are you going to take on something?
But getting back to the beginning, aren't the amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, defining what kind of world we want to live with vis-a-vis government?
I think it's an ideal, and the persistence of the ideal is important. Unfortunately, the reality is things like habeas corpus have been radically undermined in the last 16 years.
They all have been.
Yeah. and the problem is, this is coastal California's problem forever.
You're assuming they haven't been undermined forever. I mean,
it's always a struggle. I mean, every generation has to fight these battles again, right. And there's no final victory. There's no it's going to be perfect at some point. And the development from Magna Carta to the English Bill of Rights and the Glorious Revolution through our Constitution, all that stuff, how we got to a situation where we'd have these ideals about due process and habeas corpus, et cetera. It's a long history. It's a lot to have given up in 16 years of watching Mad Men.
Right. So again, the impetus behind this is not just right-wing, but I would advise everyone to keep an eye on this Constitutional Convention, because they're knocking down the states one by one. They're knocking down the little dominoes until they get to it, and there's big money behind the push to do it.
That's another good question.
We must first acknowledge that the federal government is out of control, acting far outside its constitutional powers, has become unmoored from its constitutional foundation, that this condition is urgent and, if untreated, will result in the end of the American Republic. That's what they're whipping up the people with, and that's why Nebraska has it on the bill. Wyoming just did it last month.
Yeah, but they're right. I mean, that's the problem with this, is that we leave all of these issues to the right, and we won't touch them. Look at California and New York. The legislatures of California and New York utterly dominated by the Democrats, Democratic mayors, et cetera, or governors, et cetera, and mayors. And yet we don't seem to be doing a very good job in terms of setting an example of developing alternative economies that are not so entirely wired into these global networks and this need to burn fuel constantly in order to survive. We make some progress, but I'd say it's pretty disappointing, just here in California, how one-party rule hasn't seemed to help very much. Jerry Brown's still for fracking. Oh, and actually, I mean, that would be Jerry's perspective, too. He said, well, get real. Fuel's got to come from somewhere,
Really?
Yeah.
You did it well.
No, that's his line. Get real. Whatever. Anyway, it's 663-8492. Please call in. The only caller can't be Tom.
415-663-8492. This is kind of an important thing, and it could be coming up within, a couple of years from now. They may be going for it.
Well, you brought something up, though. Don't you have to get real?
Depends what you mean. I mean, I have people tell me that I should get real because I apparently put emotional energy into caring about these questions. And they would say, the surprisingly unbearable lightness of being, they would say, why are you so worried about that? You can't change history. You can't change this. That these forces just...
We can't do anything about it, which is the very push behind this, the impetus behind this whole thing, behind the Tea Party, behind the original Tea Party, Boston Tea Party, behind the revolution, behind the creation of the Constitution itself. So who's to say this is a bad thing? I'm not sure.
Well, I just think the get real comment, right? People say, Charles, man, you just join the fun squad. It's going to be amazing. Go to the beach. It's going to be a lot of flora, a lot of fauna.
That's not what I mean.
Oh, what do I mean by get real? I would say get real is examining the things that you need to survive. From the food, the water, the electricity, the heat, the fuel, all of this stuff. And where does it come from? At what cost, that relationship? And then if you think about, wow, that's an extraordinarily destructive way to live, one that we experience, by the way, because we just get the steak. We don't see, if we see the cow, it's, whatever, we like it. It's just on the hillside there.
I take it you hitchhiked here today?
I did hitchhike here today.
In my car.
But, that's right. So all of that destruction, that's in Richmond, California. Now, if you had to live next to the Chevron refinery, you might think really seriously about burning gasoline all day, every day. But because we live here, not a problem. Just stare at the park, and everything will be fine. So I do agree with get real. I guess it could bear many interpretations. 663-8492, please.
Are you ready for a constitutional convention? Apparently, Charles is.
I don't know. I wouldn't even touch it. It seems like such a crazy abstraction to me. Maybe that made sense 200 years ago. Right now, there's still so much power that American activists have if they want to exercise it in their local governments. They can do a lot. But part of it is dealing with the humiliation of this recognition. We don't even know quite how we survive. We don't even know where our food comes from.
You're talking about conscious living, consciousness of how you live, of your effect on the world.
But only as a kind of entry point to thinking about how things could be different. See, this lifestyle stuff where it's unethical to eat this thing as opposed to that thing, I don't have any time for that, because basically it just says rich people with that perspective can, quote unquote, perfect their lives. And that's true. And I'm sure, someone is literally levitating on, fair trade quinoa over in Inverness Park somewhere right now. I mean, I don't doubt it. But to me, the question is not what should change. How do we make that change available by creating examples of the way in which the poor and working people can benefit from it as well.
So
that's a lot of stuff to chew.
So
I'm just not even.
I think
it's a lot of quinoa to chew on.
Puppies.
So what? Let's see. How does this link with the Constitutional Convention?
Creating the kind of world we want to live in.
Well,
so
maybe
it's an abrogation of responsibility to put it off to the federal government and let the feds figure it out, or you put it off to state legislature, let the state figure it out. I've got life to carry on with. I can't do anything.
Well, maybe we're like the Koch brothers. We just want to buy it as a commodity and then not remember it anymore. I mean, forget.
Well, who remembered the Constitution?
Yeah,
I mean, who this really is so far outside of the experience of most people that when you say this is a show on Constitutional Convention, I'm not surprised nobody is calling, because I'd like not to blame myself, even though I should. 663-8492. Because I mean, who thinks about things like this? How well do any of us know the Constitution, right? Or how much of any of us thought, if we have some knowledge of the Constitution, how it might be changed or improved?
Well, the Constitution, the first 10 amendments were the Bill of Rights, and the 10th Amendment reinforces the principle of federalism by stating that the federal government possesses only those powers delegated to it by the states or the people through the Constitution. There you go. What is the 16th Amendment?
16th, I actually have this written down. Power to lay and collect income taxes.
That's the
yes,
one.
Yes.
Yes.
But the key, Stephen, don't make any money like me, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the reason for these tax cuts, et cetera, is I think they want to take the fund. They want to make the federal government unable to pay any bills, so they won't be able to do anything.
I wonder. I mean,
isn't it code, as I said earlier, it's code for taking money away from social programs, from actually being responsible for other people, like we're responsible for poor people in Alabama getting food today.
The Clintons basically got that done with welfare reform. I mean, what are they going to have next?
And caller, you are on the air. What's your name, please? Hello? Caller, on line 1, you're on the air. Gone. Okay.
Oh, geez, a tease.
Wrong number.
Wrong number, yes. Oh, no.
These guys. Anything but these guys.
These guys. It's code for taking money away from social programs, basically.
Lee Atwater did a blind interview at the University of North Carolina. Lee Atwater, by the way, is the guy who came up with the Willie Horton campaign in 1988 election that was so damaging to Michael Dukakis. And he died of a brain tumor in the early 90s. Sorry, I laughed a little bit, but he wasn't a very nice guy. Anyway, he does this interview. After his death, they revealed who it was. And I won't say the word in the air because people find it offensive even when you're using it the way I'll be using it. But he said to run campaigns in the South, before all you had to say is N-word, 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 shall we say. And I said, but then things got more sophisticated. You couldn't quite say that anymore. So what you had to say is we're going to attack these social welfare, right?
Welfare mothers.
The welfare mother,
queens.
The big black woman, right? And then ultimately, after that, all you had to say is that you were going to cut taxes because people understood that cutting taxes meant cutting social welfare programs, and cutting social welfare programs meant disproportionately attacking black people. And so, I think a lot of this is coded, but I don't know.
Even though more whites are on welfare than blacks.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. But I mean, welfare reform is devastating. I mean, and a nightmare. It really isn't any kind of social welfare there. It's a sort of just a further kind of humiliation.
And just to add one more thing, most welfare goes to the elderly and children.
Well, I mean,
and I'd like to thank the welfare system for that. So much. Elderly.
But they created a myth around it.
Yeah.
Well, the Clintons exploited that, and they had their welfare reform moment, and good for them. Friends of the poor that they are. So yeah, I don't know. Constitutional Convention 663-8492. We have just a minute and a half. You would have the final say, and I will leave the studio and not say anything. Please call in.
Call in 1-415-663-8492.
I'm just going to say personally, it scares me. The whole thing just shivers up and down my spine.
Well, I'd say the federal government and these huge structures and concentrations of power, you have to think about them defensively because they can harm you. But we have very little ability to influence what happens in Washington, D.C. Essentially none. And this is not just pessimism. This is recent studies that come out that say basically the quote will of the people has almost zero impact on the way decisions get made. Will of business, will of corporations, they have a lot of impact.
Lobbyists.
I thought the number of people that attended an inauguration, I thought that had a big effect.
Well, it was huge, whatever it was.
So you think about what you want to change, and then think about the existing local democratic structures you could use to change it. Because that's where. But the thing, what the problem with that is? You'd actually have to get to know your neighbors, and for all of this quote unquote friendship and community, I think it's pretty superficial. And I think when it gets down to it, if we're actually talking about how we're going to have to pool resources and share struggle. I think a lot of people will be frightened off of that.
Well, just before we end, Charles, are you living up to what you're talking about?
I am the closest thing it gets to a Buddhist in
Charles is a very giving person.
That's right. I like to say I'm the only living Buddhist in West Maroon. Me. And I hate Buddhism. American Buddhism.
Here we go. Let's put that in the Constitution then. And so you've been listening to Let's Talk, weekly call-in show. Co-hosts Charles
Hello.
Schultz,
Goodbye.
Stephen Hurwitz, and myself, Paul Raffel. And thank you for listening, and thanks to Tom for calling in. It was great, and our phantom caller. Tune in every Thursday at 11 because this is all about you. Really, it's all about what you think, and you know what we are thinking, and that's you want to stop us talking? Call in, please.
Get real. What is the soup of the day?
And I don't know what next week's topic will be, but it'll be a fascinating one, I'm sure. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. And I'm going to leave you with a little amendment song. Thanks for